I did a thing, so hopefully I can share my screen now. So let's see if this will work. Aha, yes, permissions, always the problem. All right, so the next talk is for me. I am basically doing an introduction to React Native. If you aren't familiar with React Native, great, I have slides. So this is meant to be very much an introductory style talk, but there's gonna be some cool things in it. I'm not gonna go quite as in depth as Chris did in his talk. I'm gonna focus more on getting something that you could play with and that you can interact with and that you can get onto your device pretty quickly, because that's one of the problems with mobile, is that there's a whole variety of problems around how even just like getting a build onto a device is quite difficult, especially if you work with iOS devices. The walled garden has very high walls, and they pay you $100 just to deploy nearly anything. So, or you have to pay them rather. So it can be complicated. Hopefully, this will get you something you can play with, though. So, what is React Native? Well, React Native is a mobile-focused framework created by Facebook that allows a user to write common code, in this case, ReactJS, and deploy to a variety of platforms. I say a variety of platforms there because it's not actually just mobile applications. If you have ever used the calendar feature on a Windows machine that's running Windows 10, that calendar is actually running React Native behind the scenes. It's really going places, and a lot of apps, including like Uber, and like Airbnb, are going to React Native, although there's always a continual war between React Native and native developers, because there are some trade-offs. I have a couple of other talks I can link to later where I've done kind of a more general overview, but essentially React Native is suitable for applications that are highly display focused or presentational. They can be very pretty, they can be very quick to roll out, kind of CRUD style screens. And they allow you to share expertise, because not everybody has a team of mobile developers that know the ins and outs. And really, you don't want to know, you don't necessarily want to care about what the difference is between iOS or Android. You just want to deliver some platform or product to your customers across the various different markets and have kind of one thing that you can maintain. That's kind of where the write once, deploy everywhere, or VODA, kind of came out of. And there's a variety of options for that, including hybrid applications. But what we're talking about is React Native, which is very cool. So for some assumptions, I assume that you have at least a passing familiarity with React components, JSX, and JavaScript people. Hi, Ruby. Get some Fs in the chat for JavaScript. And if you don't have some familiarity with React, what we're presenting is pretty simple. I'll try and go over the components, but we're not going to be doing anything more than just like a button and an image, and kind of, we're not even going to be doing transitions at all, or so like no other actual screens. It'll be single screen applications entirely. I plan on doing a lot more talks in React Native, split between here and the mobile community, where hopefully they'll link together and take you from this first one, which is just let's get something on your phone, so let's start building pages, let's start using components, let's start actually building up, build comprehensive React Native applications. And we will get into something where you can show off to people that you have something cool that you have on your phone that you have built. So this is the part where I have to speak on the screen for a while, because what you guys need to do is go to that thing right there. You can scan that, and you should be able to get a link on your phone. If you scan it with your camera, it should open up in your app store to get something called the Expo client. We're going to be using that later. So what I would recommend is that everybody, if you want to follow along, and I do encourage you to do so, to pick your phone and scan the QR code. And please post in the chat if that doesn't resolve. It's using a universal URL, so it should resolve to a iTunes link if you're on iOS, and to a Google Play link if you are on Android. If you are on Windows Phone, welcome. This is year 2021. Lots of stuff has happened since you probably emerged from your cave. I don't mean to insult people who have Windows phones. It's a fine platform. It just really didn't take off. Okay, so I'm going to give people another 10, 15 seconds to look at this QR code and scan it, and then download the application. You can just right now, you don't need to do anything. You shouldn't have to sign any stuff, sign up for anything like that. Just kind of get it on your phone. All right, going to the next slide in 3, 2, 1. All right, so I'm going to start off with a quick introduction to Expo and to Snack, which is the technology that we're going to be using right now, which is pretty cool. So Snack, which you can find at this URL, which is snack.expo.io, is a web interface for creating and deploying a simple React Native application to your device. It has primitive file system management and even actually includes package management. So you can actually go get something from NPM and include it in your crazy little JavaScript project. Not everything works flawlessly. In particular, I haven't been able to get videos to work at all, which really complicated the task that we're going to be doing later. But it's really good for demos and for quick CodePen style sharing and development, because it basically gets you something from nothing. Actually, if you go to that URL, you will actually get essentially a basic Hello World style React Native application that just runs. So I have a window here in the background somewhere. Minimize this. You can see that I've just gone to snack.expo.io here. I will make this bigger because everybody always wants big text. And you can see that I've got a variety of different things, and it kind of looks a little bit like an IDE. Mark is asking, Mark, if you've got the Expo client installed, that should be all you need to do at the moment. You don't need to scan the QR code. It's just to install the client on your device. If not, you could search for the Expo client and install it that way. So I'll go over Snack just a little bit. It looks like a basic kind of light IDE. Yes, it is food-based project nicknames. It's great, especially when you use it to develop a food-based project. It's quite good. So you have a file system. It works roughly like you'd expect. You can import files, create file folders for storage, and organize and import your files like you'd expect to use with any sort of actual file system. It doesn't have tabs or anything, so I wouldn't recommend using Snack for anything more than a simple sort of demo project. But the good news is that you can download this project and it'll unpack on your file system. You can use the various different like Expo libraries and stuff to run it on your machine as well. There is a code editor, which has syntax and error highlighting and a primitive form of IntelliSense. There should be an extra I in there. I didn't check that. But because you're all smart people who have attended my talks before, all of your JavaScript projects are written in TypeScript, which means you already have IntelliSense, so that shouldn't impress you. If it does, you should definitely use TypeScript for all of your projects. It's the way of the future. You can even import packages through this window, which is cool, and we will be doing that later. We also have a deployed device, which you can run on a virtual phone, complete with some gesture controls. So if I go back over here, I can go over to iOS, can tap to play, and then it will wait. I do not have a production account with Appetizer because we do not use this that often at PunchCard. We kind of use it very, very rarely, once or twice a year. But this will, once it's done, will actually run a iOS type device, and you can actually use gesture controls and stuff on it as well, or you can interact with it from the web view as well. More on that device connected toast in a second. But you can actually run on an actual device, pushing code to the Expo client, hopefully the one you downloaded earlier. And then at the bottom, we have the bottom bar with errors and logs, where you can find your device you've connected, more on that in a second, as well as any problems in your program. So if I were to come in here and to add in something in here, like perhaps a prop that doesn't exist, you can tell that it's getting errors and stuff. Or if I haven't got it completed, it breaks and shows your traditional kind of React Native errors. Is this rendered yet? It hasn't. Okay. I would not like to enable dictation. No, I'm good. You can also configure Prettier if you want. You should also probably be using Prettier. I have a coworker at PunchCard who is relentlessly lobbying for Prettier, and I believe I am falling to the dark side. because I am starting to listen to their arguments. All right, so that was a very quick overview of Snack. Let's actually take a look at some practical examples. So you can see at the top we have some imports. So far, it's the same as every single JavaScript project. I hope the review people are still paying attention. And you can import NPM packages, which is always fun, and we will see that in a second. This is the center part of the app. It controls basically what you're seeing on the screen. This shouldn't look that different from any sort of React starter that you've seen before. It has a view as its top level component, and then it has a text component. One of the things that's interesting about React Native compared to traditional React is that there are no kind of basic HTML components. So there's no div, no p, none of those sorts of tags. You only really have native components or structured components. That's because in React Native, everything has to be wrapped in a native component at some level. So you can't just throw text on the screen. You have to create a native text object to render that text on the screen. So it means that if I was to get rid of the text, for example, this component here, and just be like, I want to put this text in a view, you can see that it works on web because it's being rendered differently. But if I was to render this on iOS, it would not work. So that's one of the weird things about React Native compared to traditional React development. You can see here we have a card and we have an asset example component, which we will take a look at, which is just basically it is this picture here. And you can see that it's just a similar, again, functional component that returns a view, a text, and an image that has a asset as well. So this nice snack icon.png. So you can see how all of this is composed there. We also have a style sheet, which is where React Native begins to seriously kind of diverge from React. Styles in React Native do not cascade like CSS does. React Native relies on more JavaScript concepts like prop drilling to achieve the same end result. So it's harder for you to say, I would like every single div or all of the p tags under this div to have this particular CSS style. What you do instead, usually in React Native, is create your own components and use that as a way to standardize your styles across different structures. Does it support context? Yes, it does. We will be using, not context, but we'll be using use state later in a practical example. Basically anything that's JavaScript styled in React Native. So hooks, functional components, class components, all of that stuff, you can use all of that with React Native, which makes it actually quite easy to develop with. So the styling is not the exact same as CSS as well, because what you are doing is you're translating, these aren't HTML elements, these are native elements that you are essentially forcing HTML styles on top of, because while there isn't necessarily a justify content prop on native iOS or native Android, there is an equivalent that it basically translates to. And they've built up basically a series of mappings that gives you nearly everything you need to do in CSS. So like Flex works out of the box, for example. So there's a lot that you can do with styling. I'm going to be doing some very basic styling because I am not great at styling. There are some very talented people who do styling at PudgeCard. So if you haven't gotten the app yet, one last time, is there a grid? No, there isn't really a good grid. Not one is offered natively through React Native. Like there's no particular grids. It's mostly Flexbox. Mainly because native tends to be different than web. Like web, you can generally assume a certain resolution, whereas in native, there is a lot of stretching and a lot of scrolling. And so you have to always be aware that like you might have a UI that you've got minimum bounds on, but that minimum bounds might run afoul of an iPhone SE or a smaller phone. So Flex is generally a good starting point for your styling because it does allow you to be really dynamic with your styles. That's the QR code for the Expo client. Yeah, different phone sizes. Yeah, camera cutouts. Yeah, notches. Yeah, all sorts of things. You know, you've got a phone like this one that has the nice notch up at the top, and you've got the other ones that have like a bullet point in the center of it, offset to the left, because why not? So Flex is a real good way to start it looking good on every device, unless you're me, in which case it looks bad on every device. All right. Next, we are going to connect some devices to Snack. So this is a different QR code. And if I have done this correctly, I should be able to open up my camera. You can see, hey, look, there's me through my camera. And I can scan this, open it up in Expo. You can see it's loading up Expo, and then it should load up. Washed out. It's going to load up what I have on my screen. You can't see that, but trust me, it has what's on the screen. And I should be able to, because it was actually this one that it was connected to. Oh, okay. So it is that one. If everyone could scan this QR code. This is what I was afraid of. I didn't actually know, but I suspected that there was that the QR codes change as you edit them. You might be seeing a lot of device connected. That's because if we scroll down here, we can see that some phones have been connected. And I can actually make some changes in here, and I can have those changes be reflected on your phone. Yeah, I'm glad no one has a phone name that's like XX Chuck Norris XX or something like that. Something really embarrassing. It's good that we're all pretty basic. Yeah, 420 phones blazing, all that. So if I type in here, hello Ruby and JavaScript communities, you should be able to see on your phone, I'm not sure if you can see it on mine, that it has actually updated, and I have changed the content on your phone. Now, you may have noticed something in here that says logs. Gee, I wonder what that means. So once you've connected to a device on Expo, you'll be able to see the details of the devices connected to them and push new code right to them live, which I have just demonstrated for you. But not only that, but you can also receive data from them as well. So I can actually add some stuff to the code that I've pushed to your device and get some data back from it. So let's change our imports so we can use some more React Native components. And let's get some logging files, and then you guys will be able to push a button and see something happen on my screen, which is cool. All right, so the first thing we need a button. We just need to be able to interact with something. So I'm going to come down here, and underneath this, I'm going to add a button. It's going to have a title. Press me for logs. I'm going to type my component properly. I'm going to add an onPress. It's going to take a function. It's going to call console.log. He's use the correct string type. He's a witch. And I have done something wrong. What have I done wrong? Unexpected token. So you can start to see that people are pressing that button, and you can start to see if I mash on it, you can see some people actually giving console stuff back to Snack. Now, I don't know about you, but that's really cool. You can see how this is, it's my boss saying I'm a witch. Great, it's fantastic stuff to hear. You can see how this would be an incredibly useful tool, and you have now something that's on your phone that is essentially a React Native application, and that you can just create from scratch. I have a named one here just so I could find it again, because I had hoped that this QR code wouldn't change and I could keep it in my presentation. But if you were to change it from like basically any other kind of, like I switched my tab over here to a different one, there's nothing special about what I just did. This is a brand new React application here, and you can make all these changes yourself and kind of do what I'm doing. So there's nothing special about what I'm doing. Okay, all right. So now let's actually build a thing. Let's not build a stupid thing. Let's build a really stupid thing, and a stupid thing you can be really proud of. And it's going to have state too. So we're going to use some JavaScript components. All right. So what are we going to build? So some keen-eyed observers and fans of pop culture have probably now clued into the fact that I've been leaving subtle hints about what the theme we're going to build on top of. That's right. Say it with me, say it in chat. What is the theme of what we're going to be doing? Come on, I know it. Everybody knows it. Say it in chat. That's right, Commander William T. Riker from Star Trek. Here's some Riker facts, TM. Riker was never corrupted by the One Ring. Has never regenerated, unlike some doctors, I could probably mention, didn't have to go to wizard school, and has never put on a helmet, unlike some other people, because no vessel over his head could contain that much awesome. He's also the subject of the greatest website on the internet, which is Scroll Down to Riker. If you've never seen Scroll Down to Riker, oh boy, this is the highlight of my talk right here. Down to riker.com. And so scroll down to Riker. It is a simple website, and it makes me smile. Essentially, you have this wonderful picture of Riker. And as you scroll down, he smiles, and then he says a Riker quote, and that's it. What we're going to do, because I said it was going to be really stupid, is we're going to recreate this website in a React Native application that we're going to put on all of our phones. It's going to be bad because I did it in about like 20 minutes, the template for it. And so we won't have this nice level of fidelity. But we're going to recreate Scroll Down to Riker. So first, some requirements gathering. What are the key characteristics of Scroll Down to Riker? Well, when you scroll down, he smiles. All right, cool. And when you get to the bottom, it shares a Riker quote. So what we'll need is we'll need some way to display the Riker images in faux GIF format, because GIFs are notorious on mobile, and Android really don't like them. I didn't want to have to mess around with a bunch of packages. So I'm going to just basically futz that with a bunch of images. We'll need some way of recognizing when the user has scrolled on their device. So we'll need some form of a recognizer, a gesture recognizer specifically. And we'll need a way of storing how far along in the Riker smile to display. Because as you can see, again, as I'm moving up and down, it's clearly got some level of state to it, right? And then we'll need to increment wherever we're at in terms of it, and then change the GIF for the images, and then display a Riker quote when the user reaches the bottom. So I think this is out of date. So everyone can keep on their same expo thing, and we will do that. And we will attempt to build this live. Yes, right, this is a live coding session in addition to being some other stuff. All right, so I don't need all you. I can leave the text. I can go. Riker goes here. Now I am definitely not connecting to my other tab, which has the finished version that I have. I don't know why you would suggest that. So the first thing I'm going to need is I have one image here, but it's just a normal image. What I need is I need approximately 75 images of Riker. And so I will get those images now. Oh gosh, my notes. You can see ahead. So I'm going to take this assets folder, and I'm going to import from my downloads. I cannot do that. Drop files. This is why you don't code live, people. There we go. All right. So now I should have some wonderful photos of Riker, starting with him being a bit bemused and ending with an award-winning smile. Okay, put that in the assets folder. So we have images of Riker. Now for some quotes of Riker. And what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to create a new component to display this Riker. So I'm going to go into here. I'm going to create a new file and call it Riker background.js. And for now, I'm just going to put in some Riker quotes, which again, definitely just typed off the top of my head, did not have prepared at all. This is all just on the fly. So now we have our images, we have our quotes. Now we need to build a component that displays Riker images and rotates through them based on percentage. And I need to style it so it looks not awful. All right. So first, I'm going to start with some imports. And I'm going to import our images of Riker here as well. Then I'm going to make our component here. I'm going to have to pass in some props at some point because my assumption is that in the app.js, we'll have essentially the component sitting here, and that the gesture controller will sit here as well, and that it will pass that information into the Riker background to tell it basically how much we've progressed down the screen. So I'm going to assume that there is a props.percentage. Of course, if you're using TypeScript, you could just make sure it would have that. So I know that there is 75 images. So I will just quickly oh, my spelling is atrocious today. So this is just a quick little function to convert a percentage from 0 to 100 into a ID of the images between 0 or between 1 and 75. And then I will create a component to return, which will just be a basic component. And I'm going to add in text. And I will add in the essential text. Scroll down to Riker. And now I can go Riker background. Gonna need to import that as well. And now, if that is working, element type is invalid. Yes, of course. There we go. So now on my phone, I have a scroll down to Riker. Now I will need the images, but what I need to do is I basically need to pipe this into something to display the proper image. So what I will do is I will create a function here called Riker image, pass in the image ID, and I want it to return an image background with source equal to Riker assets. And if I look into my Riker thing in here, I have an index where I'm basically exploring them all as image 1, image 2, image 3. And so all I need to do is match it up to the proper image name. But I'm going to need to pad the image name first, just to properly get it to, because if it's 0, I need it to actually be, if it's 1 rather, I need it to be 0, 1, for example, for it to render properly. And then I will have a function in here where I will pass in the percentage to ID. Undefined is not an object. What is happening here? Let's pass in a percentage. We'll call it 50%, so halfway smiling. I'm still getting in error f.width. Oh, I need some styles, of course. Let's get some styles here as well. Not going to type those out. And I'll get a style here. There we go. Now you should see on your phone a image of Riker looking somewhat bemused. And you can see that this property on this component, if I change it, if I go to 25, it will actually change the amount. And if I go to 100, we should see a nice smiling Riker. Excellent. So we have a component that's basically going to change the image of Riker that we are displaying currently. Next, we've got some styling in there. What's next on my to-do list? The gesture recognizer. Yes, of course. So right now, this is not interactable at all. If I put my finger up and down, it doesn't work at all. We'll need something in order for us to basically recognize that we have something happening there. So what we'll need to do is we will need to import a file from an npm package. And I will also need this. So this is just a file that I can use to basically register when the user has swiped in a direction. You might notice it's red and underlined, but I do have this nice neat thing here where I can click add dependency. Did I spell that wrong? I must gestures. As we've learned from Ruby, need to make sure that you have the correct number of S's. So now I've added an npm package to my web IDE here, and also to all of your devices. And I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty keen. All right, now what I need to do is I need to add in a config here, which we'll use and we'll basically consume in the gesture recognizer, which I'm going to just copy paste in here, abandoning all pretense of the fact that I'm coming up with all of this stuff off the top of my head. We will just put in some console logs here. And now we should start to see people are swiping down, that you can see that I am swiping down and up on my phone. Now, what we need to do is we're going to need to connect that gesture to some form of state of some kind, because we'll need to be able to store that. Because these are functional components, they don't have much in the way of doing that. So what we'll do is we will just put in here a hook. Start off at 1, and state comes from React. So now we have this percentage, and we can essentially use it to store what we have in here. And so rather than passing in 100, I can pass in percentage. And so now it's represented by this item here. So if you're looking at your phone, I'm at 1 currently. I set it to 99, and we have a smiling Riker. So everything is working just great. Now, this is honestly, the parts of the JavaScript to get this to work somewhat okay to me are less interesting than the tooling itself. So I'm just going to paste in two functions here and then talk about them. So we have handle swipe up and handle swipe down, which basically take a gesture state, which if we compare here, you can see that this is actually the type of object that we are receiving from this gesture controller. Someone's really swiping up and swiping down on it. And we're going to use an additional package called dimensions to essentially get access to our height. And then we'll do a little bit of math saying basically the distance y of your swipe. So it will swipe up more and swipe down more, depending on how much you swipe, because you want to be able to gently tickle Riker's nose or smack him in the face with your hand and get like a different result, depending on how fast or how slow you scroll. And then we're basically just setting the percentage and bottoming out at 1 or at 100 so that we don't end up going beyond the bounds, because this is not a very well-designed application. And if I didn't have those bounds, you'd be able to set the percentage to -100, and then the array index would be out of bounds and all sorts of problems. So we have to add in dimensions up here. And then the last thing we'll have to do is connect it to our functions. So handle swipe up. And handle swipe down. So now I should be able to see if this is working correctly. So mine starts at 99, so we'll start it back at 1 again, so you can see, and you can see on my screen, when I am swiping down, he begins to smile. And I can swipe back up and he goes backwards. Again, it's not the most smooth process in the world, but hey, we've built something in a couple minutes and a bunch of my time earlier. And so we have put in the gesture recognizer. We have making sure we've got a place to put the events in. We've added in that random NPM package to a random web browser and deployed it to people's phones. We've leveraged the useState hook to quickly add some basic state to our component. And we'll update that state in our way from a gesture recognizer in a way that makes sense. And the last thing to do is, if you remember from, again, the greatest website that ever exists, we have to have our random Riker quote. So what we'll do is we will go back to this Riker background file, and we have this text here that we're basically going to repurpose. So what we'll say is we'll say props.percentage. If it equals 100, then we will, if it doesn't equal 100, rather, we will show this. If not, we will show Riker quote goes here. And so now if I scroll down, and you can see I get to the bottom and it says Riker quote goes here, and I scroll up and it goes back to scroll down to Riker. So now the only thing to do is, again, this part to me, the JavaScript part of like, hey, let's find some code that works, much less interesting to me than getting this all working on your phone. So magical function that just sort of works if I have the right bracketing on it. And now when we scroll down, we should get a random Riker quote every single time. So there are some excellent questions in the chat. I haven't really been paying attention to the chat. I've been working, so I'm going to look at those before I go back to my slides. So Matt asked, does it scale? Expo definitely does not. Expo has a limit to the scale, especially the snack, because obviously you don't want a ton of people working on snack. It's really for one person to show, but it's great for things like in a meeting, because you can have it on everyone's phones, right? Like imagine this was a meeting and everybody had their phones just sitting at a meeting table or remotely. I could make a change. I could make some styling. Like that text isn't very good. I could add some styling to it if I wanted to, and have it change for everybody else. But React Native in general does scale. It does have some negative aspects to it when it comes to scaling at like true enterprise level. Like one of the problems with React Native is a table view, which is one of the more common types of view where you have like a long list of content. Think your Google Play Music or your iTunes library where you have 10,000 songs by William Shatner, if you're like me. If you're quickly flicking through that, that can be there's a lot of work that's gone into making that as efficient as possible. React Native isn't as great at that, but you can get really darn close. And it's scaled up for companies like Uber, right? So I think it'll scale up for nearly anybody else. It does require some knowledge of kind of React fundamentals, like the same things that will burn you in React will burn you in React Native. So abusing the render cycle will be really bad if you have components where you're making a top level change and then suddenly everything is changing. That will be really destructive to your performance. So it's really rapid development, but it also has a great deal of tooling as well. And compared to most forms of traditional development, React Native brings a lot of the features of web to it. Like it's only with the Swift UI and various, I think Kotlin has a version of it as well that has live reloading. You had to like recompile most of your mobile applications you're making changes. Yeah, you could absolutely store state. Like there's no sense, like you can put Axios in here, you can make calls out to a database or something. There's lots of different, yeah, Swift UI has live reload. You could store state absolutely in React Native. Like there's like context and Mobix and all sorts of different state options. Redux is quite popular as well. Basically anything that React can do, React Native can do. Because essentially it's just JavaScript. So we've had projects where we've run ffmpeg on an application. So it's really good. There are some limits to React Native as well. Like there's a bus that basically, as the native code is communicating with the JavaScript code, it has to pass across this bus. And previously, because of the structure of native applications, it would be limited to basically one pass over that bus, but now they have multiple of them. And so there's the potential for multiple different JavaScript modules to have their own bus, not be limited by that. Are there any other questions? Yeah, the components and styles are really what's attractive about it.
We have some more questions in the Q&A section there.
Oh my goodness. Oh. So Chris asked, does React Native compile to native iOS or Android binaries, or does it use a web server? So like you might have noticed, like, yes, I didn't actually deploy anything to get it onto your phones. So it is basically serving the JavaScript assets up to Expo. But you can create IPA and APK files from React Native and compile them down. Because remember, these are native components that we're displaying. We're just displaying them in a new way. We're not creating storyboards or XIB files or anything for them. We're creating actual honest-to-goodness React Native applications. And even Expo, which is a more fluffy environment. Like when you develop an application in Expo, you can deploy entire applications with state and local files and everything onto it. You can use Expo to wrap it up, or you can eject it into a traditional React Native application, which will then, you can use the console commands in the Xcode and Enter Studio command line tools to create an IPA and an APK, because they do generate actually native projects that they essentially run out of. I'm looking at the Q&A. So Chris, if you have any follow-ups to that, add them to the Q&A. And if not, I'll see them in the chat in a second. Questions for maybe a later presentation from Mark. Are there some best practices for reusing code between React Native and React Web? And how do you handle platform-specific iOS versus Android theming? Two great questions. The first is that if you have proper React and React Native standards, and you should be creating your own components, that's probably the best way to make sure that you have a good transition between React and React Native. I will say you can run React Native on the web, so you can just run React Native everywhere and use that, in which case all of your code is portable. It's the different. It's like this is running in web. I have the exact same application web, and you'll see in a second it'll load, and I can actually do the same thing here. I can scroll down to Riker. So that's a possibility, but working in components is probably the best way to isolate that. Think of it like an API layer almost. If you are composing things from button classes that you've created, you just need to go in and scoop out whatever the HTML specific buttons you have and replace them with the React Native specific buttons. Obviously, that doesn't work with like a really rich code base because you'd have a lot, but it's also the case that the rest of your non-template code should work. So if you have contexts, or if you have Redux or Mobex or whatever, or Axios, all of that should just work because you're essentially just running it all in a version of JavaScript on the phone. There are some slight problems sometimes with the various versions of JavaScript that are on a device, but that's not a big issue these days. And as for platform-specific theming, that depends on how you want to go. In general, in mobile, if you're targeting multiple platforms, it's usually a good idea to abstract that away, to use not the native iOS and Android styling, but use some of your own, because that provides a unified experience across platforms. If you don't do that, most of the components will look roughly like you expect them to. Like if I come back in here and I get rid of, if I add in that button again, if I add in that button again, you will see that if you can see this on web, it has this styling to it. It's got like just like a standard kind of HTML button. But if you can look on, oh, you're not gonna be able to see that. It looks like an iOS button on my iOS device. If you're looking at an Android device, it looks like an Android button. So a lot of that is handled already. But in general, the recommendation is to lift your styling above it if you're not making like a really basic application, and generate some like shared styling between it. With PWAs coming to the app stores, so you see more apps that don't need native integrations moving to mobile apps, or moving to web apps. Maybe. That will always be limited by the support that Apple and Android have for the various different functions. Because if all you want to do is display information, have someone fill out a form and hit enter, then you could use a PWA for that. That's kind of where I see hybrid applications being used sometimes, because hybrid applications are basically just a website that's masquerading as a mobile application with some math done to make it scroll like you'd expect an app would scroll, that kind of that momentum-based scrolling that native applications have. It comes when you need to access things like device storage or cameras or accelerometers or some of the low-level the device fundamentals, like the graphic stuff. That's where it can get complicated. So if Apple and Google support PWAs more, I could see that. I could see there being a place, but I think there's always going to be a place for a native application, because they will also be faster and snappier, because the PWAs are running in a web browser, and there's always going to be abstractions and problems with that compared to native, which is just going to be snappier. So kind of the thesis of my talk on hybrid apps versus React Native apps is, on one side you have native, which will always be the fastest and give you the best access and the easiest access to all of the device stuff. And then on the far side, you have progressive web apps, which are basically just websites. And in between, you've got some kind of spectrum of, generally, as you move towards the web apps, increasing ease of use for developing, because it's all web technologies. And on the left, it's kind of speed. And React Native is kind of at a critical juncture where you get a lot of benefit from being fast in a native way, and a lot of benefit from the web side of things of being easy to develop for. You mentioned that video support is a challenge with React Native. No, video is great in React Native. Video is crap in Snack. It's awful in Snack. It's very bad in Snack. Are there any other cases where it's hard to use or another framework would be a better choice? You can do whatever you want to do in React Native. I think it really depends on like where are your engineers and staff? Where are your expertise levels? Because there's a question immediately afterwards: does React Native connect to core data? Yes, it gives you enough technology to reach from the JavaScript layer to anything on the native layer. And then the question is always, can you reuse something that someone else has done? So, for example, there are camera plugins that are quite common where you can abstract away 90% of the camera stuff. And it's like, okay, it gives you an ability to take a photo, to load that photo into an object in React and display it and do all the JavaScripty things you want to it. But the more you want to get into those lower level core stuff, the less likely React Native is to do what you want. It probably does 99% of what you want to do. That's why I recommend it to most companies. But if you're making like an AR kit thing, for example, well, that depends on a lot of lower level stuff, and you might be better just writing that natively. So there are a few things where it would be a downside, but in general, it's kind of sweeping the nation. Does React Native connect core data? Yes, it does. I'm not sure how great it is, but I know there's like SQLite plugins as well for it and file system plugins. But there's all sorts of different problems with file systems as well. Like it's a phone is not just a file system you can interact with. You have to worry about the stores that store temporary data versus the stores that store cloud data versus the stores that store like device data. So you might put something on a device expecting to see it there next time you open it up, but you have a ton of video and movies and photos on your device, which means that the system reclaims those directories so that it can like basically clear up that space. And so there are concerns, but they're definitely like you can get around it pretty easily. Flutter versus React Native. Been happy with React Native so far, but have you had any experience with how it compares to Flutter as a cross-platform solution? I admit I don't have as much experience with Flutter. I tend to view Flutter like I view Firebase, which is that it does a lot of things. And if you want it to do those things, it's great. But if you don't want it to do those things, it's not so great. So if you want it to build an application that connects to Firebase and does authentication through there and just works, great. But in general, I find that projects don't fall into those same levels of like they're not that simple. Every project starts out small and then inevitably grows large and has a whole bunch of different interconnected dependencies on it. And that's why I like React Native a little bit more, because I find that Flutter is more opinionated. And React Native also has the inherent benefit of being able to reuse a substantial portion of the expertise of your engineers. Like if I was to show someone this file, they would think of it, other than this strange object down here, this is basically a React file, whereas Flutter is using its own thing. It doesn't leverage any existing technologies and any existing kind of basis. We've actually seen a pretty easy time taking a React engineer and converting them to a React Native engineer. There has been issues with like the native stuff, but that's kind of to be expected at this point. I believe that was the last Q&A. We only have a couple of minutes left. So I will throw it back over to the person who's supposed to present on the end, which is me. So thank you everyone for coming. I hope you enjoyed this. It was a new format. I hope that you stayed for some of it or all of it. I hope that the JavaScript people have gotten some stuff from the Ruby people and vice versa. I hope that all of you have Riker on your phones, because that makes me very happy from a very weird sense. But I have a few things on the outro to go over really quickly. The first is that there is a Dev Edmonton Society meeting that happens every second Wednesday of every month. It happens on the 13th of January is our next one at 8 p.m. There will be a Google Meet link. You can go to the Dev Edmonton Society channel on Slack for more details. You do not have to be a member of Dev Edmonton to go to the meeting and contribute and have your voice be heard. However, only registered members can actually vote on things. It's a $20 annual fee, and feel free to do that or not do that. But please feel encouraged to attend. We want as many voices out as we can, so that we can always make sure that we're listening to the community. Important in listening to the community portion, if you are a registered member of Dev Edmonton, the Dev Edmonton Society board elections will be held at the January AGM, which should be on the 23rd of January, if I'm getting my days correct. Mark, correct me in the chat if that's not the case. We'll be firming that up. Yep, he's confirmed it. Excellent. We'll be firming up that date and posting 10 a.m. There we go. All right, we don't have an event link yet, but that's going to come pretty soon. And then next is we normally have a job section here. I will say that Punchcard is hiring, so check out punchcard.io/careers. If you wanted to do a shout out, or if you're looking for work, post in the ExchangeJS channels or in the Ruby channels. Vertical City is hiring a senior full stack developer. Will there be posts in that about, there'll be posts and opportunities about that, I'm guessing. Kelsey, make sure to do that. If you have an opportunity, please post it. Oh gosh, 2 minutes left. I got a warning. Post about it in opportunities, and please link it to the JavaScript and to the Ruby meetups, because that's probably where you're going to find your people. Thank you to our sponsors, including Punchcard. This is the place where I work. It's not first because I work there, it's just randomly assigned. Also to Jobber. Punchcard does software consulting. Jobber does like small business help for people who are running their own business. It's really cool. It's really big. You've probably heard of it. Thanks also to Iron Sights. They do programming for oil field technologies. I think they have some truck management type things. I need to talk faster. Oh gosh, thanks to Startup Edmonton, because it's always great, and they're fantastic people. And this is a wall that you'll see in real life once the stuff is gone. No, we can't extend the meeting. I'm just going to rush to the end. You can sponsor us today. This isn't as important, but if you're interested, go to sponsors at exchangejs.com. Okay, next meetup, February 4th, 2021. That is the first Thursday of next month. If you're interested in talking, please come talk to myself, or talk to Andy, or talk to Abram, or talk to Kelsey. You can also post, and one of us will find you. Yeah, no, yeah. Thanks, Aston. All right, virtual social. We'll have maybe talks in the remote tables. I'm not sure if this whole thing is going to shut down. I think it will. I have about 27 seconds left, so I'll encourage you to spend the last couple seconds talking amongst yourself. Maybe we might be able to extend it. Who knows? But thank you all for coming out and making this one of the largest events we've seen in a bit. Share it to all your friends. All right, I'm going to stop talking now. Bye.